looking at this page that displays a random image when you load it. And I had talked you through how the random number generator will give you a real number between 0 and 1. You multiply that by the thing that you extend the range by multiplying that out, and then you can convert that to an integer using round. There are things other than round. You can round up and round down. You can round up with ceiling, it's called. I think it's CEIL in JavaScript, and you can round down with floor. There may be times where you'd want to do one or the other. It would probably take too long for you to notice it, but it turns out here, and I'm sure I mentioned this when I showed you this in SOFT6008, that the one at 0 and the one in the last one at 6 occur less frequently than the others. Did I talk to you about that before when you saw this before? So does anybody remember why? Or did anybody not see it before? If basically the very bottom one, 0, is less likely to occur because for you to get 1, right, anything from 0.5 to 1.49 will round to 1. And to get 2, anything from 1.5 to 2.49 will round to 2. But to get 0, all you've got to work with is 0 to 0.49 whatever. So the probability of getting a 0 is half that of getting something else. So that's something to bear in mind, if you're making some sort of a game. If you don't do the random number generation properly, if you don't think about it hard enough, the probabilities of some outcomes may be off. I mean, I'm sure in the Wild West, people were hung or shot for less. I mean, if you're playing cards and the probability of an ace is half that of something else, that's going to upset someone. Sean?
Your probabilities are always 0 to whatever number you specify.
Yeah.
How can you make it so maybe it's between two specific numbers?
Okay, that's a very good question. Now you said probabilities, but you meant the random number generator. Yeah. So the random number generator is going to generate a number between 0 and 1. Okay? And I said if you multiply that by 6, you get a number between 0 and 6. Okay? Suppose you wanted 10 to 16. Right? That's not an obvious one straight away, I mean, you could imagine if you were doing a lot of random number stuff, you might write a function that you could say, pass in parameters, I want a number between 10 and 16, give me one. What you would have to do is do it piece by piece. So you again start with the random number between 0 and 1, okay? And when I say between 0 and 1, someone spoke with great confidence that it never actually gets to 1. I figure out they read the page I didn't read. But I imagine that's the case. It never quite gets to 1, So between 0 and 1, multiply that by 6, which will give you a number between 0 and 6. And if you add 10 to that, you'll get 10 to 16. Yeah? You don't believe me. It's that much work though. So if you want to get a random number between 10 and 16, get a random number between between 0 and 6, and add 10 to it. That's all you can do. You can't say it's anything more sophisticated to the random number generator than what it does. It just does 0 to 1, a real number. So this is an example of why you might want to use ceiling instead of just plain round, or floor instead of just plain round. Because if you were using, if you rounded everything up, for example, then the probabilities would they be equal? I guess they would. If you rounded everything up, in this example here, or the one we looked at, you'd always get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. You'd never get a 0, but the probability of getting a 6 would be the same as any of the others. I'm sorry now I started, but I love probability. It's my favorite subject in maths, so I get hung up on these things. So now, let's have a look at this here then. Okay? This is just a small extension of exactly the same thing really. Okay? With some logic. So let's have a look at this code here and I'll talk you. Well, first of all, I'll tell you what's happening. So we have 2 coins are tossed and you can either get heads or tails, obviously. Interestingly, if there's only 2 possibilities, what do you think? Do you think I'm using rounding, ceiling, or floor? If you had to bet on one, thinking we're talking about gambling. What do you think you're more likely going to see in the code? We'll see, I could be wrong. I would say if it's going to be one of 2, you know, you probably wouldn't round up or down. You just round, you just round to the nearest, you wouldn't always go down or always go up. You just round to the nearest one so you get 0 and 1, but we see. Also, what do you think I'm multiplying by?
2.
Am I multiplying at all?
Oh, no, actually.
We've got 1 or 2 possibilities. And it's going to give you a value between 0 and 1. And you have something that'll round something up or down depending. Probably wouldn't bother multiplying by anything. You take your random number generator, it'll give you a value between 0 and 1. And do a round on that will turn out then to be either 0 or 1 depending. So looking at this, if I had to guess what the code is underneath, and I may yet be guessing, I would say that's what's going on. No. So then if you get 2 heads, you win a prize, okay? And I don't want to get into the argument of which side is heads and which side is tails. My view is that the side that is always the side with the national emblem that doesn't change with the value is the head, because the term comes. Well, yeah, because that's the term that comes from the British use, where you always had the Queen's or the King's head on one side and you had the tails on the other side. And actually, if you look at the euro, if there are any heads, actual people's heads, they're on the national emblem side. But some people argue that, the salmon had a tail or whatever. Just don't want to go there.
The money side, that's the heads, the one that you should go with.
Yeah, like I said, I don't actually want to have that conversation. Anyway, get 2 heads, you win a prize, okay? So what we've done here is we check for the 2 values, and if the 2 of them are the same, you win a prize. And so we do document.write of the teddy bear. Okay? I'm prepared to accept the argument that these are actually tails and not heads. But anyway, get 2 ones there and you win a prize. So let's have a look at the code now and just see what... I feel like, to be honest now, it's probably overconfidence on my part, but I feel like you should even be able to write that code now if I just said, write the code for that there now, lads. Do you think you could? It's really just more pieces of the puzzle that we've already used. Just putting them in a different order and stuff. What do we need to happen? Let's have a think about what do we need to happen?
So it just needs to print off 2 images.
Yeah. So we've got 2 coins. So we need to generate a random number for the first one. Right?
And if that random number happens to be the same.
And so we're going to generate a random number between 0 and 1. We're going to round that. So we'll have an actual integer then between 0 and 1. Let's call the coins. We know I saw there when I was looking. We saw the coins coin1.jpg and coin0.jpg they were called. So we know what the coin is called. So let's say coin1 equals round random. That'll put a 0 or a 1 into coin1. We can say coin2 equals round random. Will give us a value between 0 and 1 in coin2. Then we do a document.write of we're building up the image tag like we saw. Now that was no mean feat building up that image tag because all those quotes and those slashes were enough to wreck your head. We build up the image tag, output the image tag for the first coin, whichever is appropriate, as long as it says coin0.jpg, we're happy, or coin1.jpg, whichever the case may be. We do the same for the second one. And then just to see if you win a teddy bear, we would just say if coin 0 or equals 0 and coin 2 equals 0, or whatever the case may be, maybe in ones, then document.write picture of lovey Teddy. So I think that's what it would look like. So your faces anyway there gave me an indication that maybe you could have written that yourself there now if I'd asked you to, but it's very late in the day really for... No. Okay. And that's pretty much it, isn't it? So to have a look there then, and I'll zoom in on the individual parts and just talk you through them. But I mean, it's what we expected to see. The document.write is an even bigger head wreck than in the example we saw, because we also have to account for the width and the height. And even then at that, we're missing the alt. It's still not complete. We should have an alt as well. Do you know? But it's enough to make the point. So let's talk through that. So this is going to give us a random number, a random real number between 0 and 1. But it's the whole thing, the math.random. It's important that that math there is in uppercase M. Just doesn't work otherwise. And we put that into rand coin. So Sean, what might rand coin hold after we've run that?
0 or 1.
Oh.
Well, actually, no, sorry, 0 but not exactly.
So is it a real or an integer?
Go
on. Real, okay. So it might be something like 0.721946054. Okay? Now, if we take that 0.765, whatever I just said, and we do math.round to it, well, if it's 0.7 something something something, we'll end up with 1. The integer 1. And we'll put that into coin 1.
Does that have to be done on 2 lines?
No. You could say var coin 1 equals math.round open bracket math.random close close. And of course, if you were multiplying out, you could even do it in one line. You could multiply it in there. So it could all be on one line. You do, interestingly enough, you do have to assign it to a variable, because you're going to talk about that value more than once. And the problem is, if you were to just say, okay, let's say you wanted to do the document.write in one line, you could display either face of the coin randomly in one line, in the big line .document.write. But if you want to know if it was 1 or 0, for your if statement, you won't be able to say if random equals 1, because every time you say random, ding, you get a new one. So we must copy it into a variable so we can talk about it after.
But you can still do that in one line, can't you?
Yeah, you can still do that in one line. But I'm saying, if you were just displaying the coins, you could do it in one line. But what we need to do is we need to know what we said, because we're going to use it for the test, for the prize. So we need to put into a variable. No. Here we're doing the same again, and then we have a value in coin 2. So now we have coin 1 is either 0 or 1, and coin 2 is either 0 or 1. This is our document.write. I won't go through this character by character again, but I will just drive home the point that this open quote here is the beginning of the quote here, and it ends here. This slash quote isn't the end of the string. That slash is there to indicate that that's a quote in the string. I also discovered yesterday in one of the labs, and to be honest, it hadn't occurred to me before, you can't put a space between the slash and the quote. If you do escape, space, quote, you end up with a catastrophic failure actually, because then the string ends and it all goes horribly wrong. So you can't have a space if you're escaping a quote like that. For the most part in JavaScript, a space here or there isn't going to make much of a difference. That's one scenario where it's catastrophic. But of course, in general, if you've got something between quotes, every character counts anyway. So we're going to say we've got an image, and it's called coin and some number, which you know is either going to be 0 or 1. And then we have .jpg quote. So we've escaped that quote there. And then we need to say width equals 100, height equals 100, and that has to be in quotes. That's what's going on there. And this is the beginning of the string, and that's the end of it there. I also discovered in the labs yesterday that you have to be careful when you're taking stuff from my slides, because this is formatted like this because I ran out of screen. But if you go onto a new line, it has meaning. So you can type away off the edge of the screen. You can even do a word wrap and have it wrap around visually so that you can see the long lines of code in the window. But if you hit return and go on to a new line, it all goes horribly wrong. I think I don't need to make the point anymore that JavaScript isn't particularly forgiving or particularly friendly or particularly informative about what it didn't like. So you do need to be careful because it's very easy to just get stuck.
See the backslash quote after JPG?
Yep.
What quote does that correspond with?
That's the, do you know, if you imagine you have an image tag, you're saying img src equals quote photo.jpg quote.
Oh, so
That's that quote.
one
It's the quote on the end of the name of the image.
Yes.
But it's split over a few parts because we're inserting a variable into there. Now there's something in this which is a bit sloppy. If I was correcting this on a bad day, I might deduct some marks because here we're constructing a string. You know, this is a string with the characters img space src equals quote coin. And this is a number, you know. Really, you should, you know, if you're being pedantic, you should convert that number 1 to the character 1, or if it's the number 0, to the character 0 before you put it into before you add it to the string. But JavaScript is very flexible. It's a bit slutty, really, I think, as a language. You know, it doesn't really care about some things, you know, and so a lot of the time in JavaScript, you can be very sloppy with whether it's an integer or a real or even a string. And 9 times out of 10, you'll be grand, actually. Of course, it's that one time out of 10, or maybe even 1 time out of 100, you know, the night before an assignment is due, you know, the whole thing stops working and you're like, what? You know? So you might need to be stricter with yourself than Java requires you to be. You know, just because sometimes it can cause problems. Like I've seen students have big problems with code where like it's the code isn't behaving properly and you're looking and you're seeing, you know, you're saying if x is less than y, do whatever. And like x is 3 and y is 10 and you're looking at it there in the code, x is 3, y is 10, why is it not doing what it's supposed to do? But of course, in stringland, the string 10 is greater than the string, the string 3 is greater than the string 10. I've lost you now. It's late in the day, lads. Don't worry. It's not JavaScript. It's just, it's been a long week. We'll come back to that point anyway. I'm just giving you lots of cautionary tales. So you do need to be careful about your types. So JavaScript is flexible, but that's not always a good thing because sometimes it mightn't work out. No. Here we're just saying if coin 1 equals 1 and coin 2 equals 1, then document.write, you know, happy, cuddly, lovely bear. And so if that isn't true, you don't see it. So any questions on that? So what I'd like you to start thinking about now is extending this. So you may have done this in SOFT6007 already, but I'd like you to think about how you might extend something like this into some sort of a game. So I mean, you could, for example, do something like this, where you throw dice, and if you throw 7, you win a prize. Yip-de-doo, works straight away. You know?
Also, you have to just think of the images which combine to make 7, and
Yeah.
those two things are equal.
So that's slightly more complex than, I mean, it's more complex than the 2 coins because there are 6 sides to a die instead of 2 sides to a coin. And also the logic is a bit more complicated because instead of seeing if 2 things are equal, you're adding them together and seeing if they're 7. But otherwise, it's almost the same thing. It's just slightly more complex in two respects.
It was going to be quite a...
Oh, if you get to, I think you can possibly win loads of money as well. Maybe that's not implemented. Anyway, we'll see. Another thing you could do is, is this implemented? No, this is just the question rather than the answer. But you could see how you could make a slot machine. You know, you just have 4 coins, and instead of 2 sides, there's maybe 4 sides. And you could make that more complicated by, well, if you get 3 of a kind, you win a small prize. If you get all the same, you win a big prize. If you really want to push the boat out and show off what a great programmer you are, your bar could be wild. There's extra programming in that. And you could see how you could do something like a game of Snap. Turn over 2 cards. If they're the same, it's Snap. If you were really showing off, you could do, simulate sort of a Texas Hold'em scenario or something. I would hate to have to write the code to say, like, if you 2 of a kind, if you full house or royal flush, that would wreck your head. But could you see how it's, from a programming point of view, it's just more programming. Conceptually, it's not a whole lot more difficult than the 2 coins. So I would like you to get your JavaScript programming hands dirty by trying something like this in the labs next week. So have a think about it over the weekend. But all you're going to be doing is extending it in a number of ways, extending the number of possible things the random number generator could come up with, the number of slots, and maybe some variation in how the prizes are assigned. If you don't feel like thinking something up, maybe you should just work on the concept of a slot machine. There's plenty in that to keep you busy. And if you can make a slot machine half decent, I'd be happy you get what's going on there. Yes, sir.
When we did the random picture one, actually, you know the way it would keep re-randomizing every time you refreshed it? What I tried doing was putting in a button that would call another function to do the same thing, just regenerate it while you're on the page rather than trying to refresh.
Yeah,
But
that's a whole other thing. And soon, everything we do, we'll do that way, and you will never see document.write again. But I want us to do it this way first, just to get into the swing of things. So a good few people in the class might not have done anything like that, and also just want to get used to the debugger. With JavaScript, I think it's very important to do a little bit and see that it works, and then do another little bit and see that it works. If you write your program that's 100 lines long, and there's a hair out of place, the browser might just say, sorry. And that's all you get, blank screen. So it can be hard to debug. Also, what we'll try and do in the labs is take a look at some of the debugging tools. I find that the console, the error console in Firefox is loads for me, because I'm the kind of person that I make syntax errors. I have the bracket in the wrong place, or a missing semicolon, or a lowercase math.round instead of an uppercase m for math.round. So the kind of mistakes I make, the error console is great because it's like a syntax checker. There are more sophisticated things you can do where you can trace variables and stuff like that. Hopefully you won't need those, but we can have a look at those. Yes, sir.
I got to take okay.
Yeah, no bother. Yeah. So, any questions? So have a think about that over the weekend and how you might go about it. I see a few puzzled faces. Don't worry, we'll get into the swing of it and you'll be grand. Have a think about what you might do. If you're not interested in imagination this weekend, think about how you might implement a slot machine. Okay? It's exactly what we have in the examples here. It's just more. The code for what I showed you the past few days, I'll put links to that on my blog. That's colinmcit.blogspot.com. So the code samples will be there. So all you'll be doing really is just extending those with more. Nothing very different, just more. Okay? Any questions? Great stuff, so guys, and apologies for the late start.